everyone, and welcome to this first video in my Ktor for Beginner tutorial series. In this series, you are going to learn how all the basics that you need to make your own backend. We are going to make something like this. This basically is a server that stores different fruits in the database and displays information about these fruits. So the server is running right now on my local machine, and as you can see, we have name, we have season, and we have like a list of countries. We have an image URL, and we can actually access that image, as you can see here. And if we go back, we can actually request the data in a specific order. So we can pass the sort direction parameter, descending order, for example, and we can sort by a specific country. We can search for a specific name, and of course we have a post request that we use to add new fruits to the database, and we have a patch request to update specific fruit. So a delete request to delete fruits from the database, and we have some authentication mechanism. So we are going to learn about different authentication mechanisms. We are going to do basic authentication and authentication using a JSON Web Token. So we have two endpoints. Users can register and they can log in. As you can see here, I think I have my login information. So if I log in, for example, here, the server gives me a token and shows me when this token expires, and I can use this token to add new fruits using this endpoint. And if I try to add something, let's say without a token, the server will respond and with unauthorized. So let's get started. So the first thing that you're gonna need to do is create a new Ktor project, and to do that, the easiest thing is to use the this web wizard. So go to start.ktor.io, and this project artifact here, feel free to leave the default one, but you can change it to your own name or your own domain if you want. You have some configuration here which we don't need to like change at the moment, but what we need, we have some plugins that I have written here. So we are going to need those 9 plugins. As you can see here, I have some of them. So you're going to need authentication basic and authentication basic, authentication DWT. So add those, and you're going to need routing. Make sure you can add them by clicking this purple button here. And static content, default headers, and call logging, and last but not least, yes, content negotiation and Kotlin X serialization. So click add there, and as you can see, I have those 9 plugins, which are mostly what we are going to need to get started here in this series. What these plugins will do is they will basically add some dependencies for us in the project, and some starter code, for each plugin to make our life easier, basically. So click the download button and download the file, extract it, and open it in IntelliJ. And after you open it in IntelliJ, you're probably gonna end up with this README file. But first thing, let's open. Let's go to source here, this directory. Open main, open Kotlin, and here you can find the application KT file, which what we're going to open. And here in this file, you're gonna see the main function, which what we're going to use to run our server. So let's just run our server using this triangle here, button. Click run application and wait a little bit for our server to run. Okay, so our server is running. As you can see here, the server is responding at 000 and this address. So go ahead and copy this. Okay, let me just open in Firefox. Okay, so you can paste that on your browser and go, and it will open up. It will actually load data from the server. So as you can see, the server here says hello world. Okay, so our server is running. So let's explore a bit more. As you can see here, we have this module function that has all these configure functions, functions that start with the word configure, which are functions that have been added by the wizard that we've used earlier. And the purpose of these are just to configure each plugin, to add the specific code that configures each individual plugin. So what we need to work with right now, what we're concerned with, is this the routing plugin, which will enable us to add some endpoints, because that's what we want to start with in this tutorial. So hold Control and click on this function, configure routing. Command here. And as you can see, we have this routing block. And in this routing block, we have this get function here. And it has this string, which is just a slash, which is an empty endpoint basically. And it says here call.respond text hello world. So this is basically what happens when we opened this URL in Firefox, or if you opened it in Postman. Basically this does the same. It just tells it we have an endpoint that is just a slash, just an empty endpoint here. Basically when I say empty, I mean like we don't have any specific word here. It's not like slash hello or anything, so it's empty. So that's why when you make a request to this, the server responds with hello world. So that's how this basic endpoint is created here. So let's make our first endpoint. Let's go to the main directory here, main working directory, where we have this application Ktor file. I'm going to create a new package because I just like to sort my files a bit. So I'm going to create a new package. I'm going to call this data, and inside data I'm going to create another package. So type .model, enter, and this will create basically two nested packages. So inside model, I'm going to create a new Kotlin data class. I'm going to call it simple response data class, and this simple response is going to have two things. It's going to have a boolean and a string. So the boolean is going to be named is success, and the message is a string, and we need to annotate this for it to be for the Kotlin serialization plugin to be able to take this data class and convert it to a JSON when the server responds to the client, and vice versa. We need to annotate this data class with the serializable annotation. Serializable, yes, import serializable. And so we've created this very basic simple response. Let's create our first endpoint that's going to respond with this response. So I'm gonna go to the routing file here, routing Ktor file, and here below this hello endpoint, I'm gonna type get, and use this one, this overload, and my endpoint is going to be /simple, and open these braces, and here I'm going to say call. We are going to use this call object to respond to the client. So this is a reference to that specific call. You know, when the client makes a call to this endpoint, you access information about that call using this object. So we want to do is respond basically to that call. So we are going to use respond, and as you can see, there's a lot of overloads for this respond function. There's this one that takes a message, there's this one that takes a status code and the message, which is what we are going to use. So status is HTTP status code, okay, and message is simple response, which is the data class that we've created, and is success is true, message is hello from simple, basically. So let's rerun our server here. Don't forget to rerun the server, and let's go back to Postman actually here and make a request to the simple endpoint. So I'm just going to close all these tabs open. You can use any HTTP client you like, but Postman is very popular, but they are relatively similar. When you open Postman for the first time, you can create a new request using this plus icon, basically creating a new tab. So create a new tab like this, and here we can say localhost and colon 8080, which is the port that our server is running at, and we can say, for example, /hello to make sure that the hello endpoint is working, and hello is working. So let's try simple and send, and as you can see, we have our simple response that we created here as responded by the server. So this is how the serialization plugin works with content negotiation. So it basically takes the fields that you have in your data class and converts them to this JSON format. So basically we have these key value pairs here from the information within our data class itself. Okay, cool. So let's start building actually our fruit server. So let's make some fruits first. So to make fruits, we need to make a data class that represents the fruit object, basically. So in the model package, I'm going to create a new data class called fruit. So this data class for now is going to have an ID, so string, and a name. Just for simplicity here, we're going to add more fields later, and of course don't forget to annotate it with @serializable. And for the endpoint that we're going to create, I'm going to create a new package for it. So here in Kotlin, I'm going to create a new package. I'm going to call this routes. And here in routes, I'm going to create a new Kotlin file called fruit routes. So that's a Kotlin file. And here I'm going to create a function that has all the basic endpoints for our fruit, basically. So I'm going to call it fruit routes, just like that. And here I'm going to make a new get endpoint. So if I try to make a new get endpoint like this, as you can see, get is not resolved, and that is because here in this function, this fruit routes function that we've just created is just a global function, and it doesn't have access to the routes scope at all, so it doesn't see any of the endpoint specific routes. And this import is wrong, by the way. It's not the import for the endpoint. And to fix that, we are going to make this an extension function of route. So route dot. So by making it an extension function of a route from here from IO Ktor server routing, we get that resolved right away. So our endpoint is going to be get fruit, and first, before we return some fruits, let's create a list of fruits. So I'm going to create a variable here, fruit list of fruits. So for the ID, I'm going to say, for example, 1 here, and duplicate this a couple of times using Control D. So 3, 4, just like that. And maybe oops, just like that. So we have the list here, and whenever we someone makes a request, we want to return the whole list of fruits. So we can basically use call and then respond. Make sure you select the overload with the status code, and we can see status. Oops, not this one, but status code OK, and the message is fruit list. So like this, our endpoint should be okay, but it won't work excuse me, because this fruit routes function is never called. So we need to call this function on our routes block for it to be loaded actually in the server. So go to the routing KT file here, and here within the routing block we are going to call the fruit routes function like this, and now we can restart our server. And if we go back to Postman, we make a call to get fruit, we can see the server responds with a list of our fruits. Okay, so far that's good. And what about receiving parameters in our GET request? So as you know, like in GET requests, which GET requests are typically for getting data, you usually might need to pass some specific query parameters for your query. For example, if you want to search for specific data, or if you want to sort the data in a specific order. So how do we read data about the parameters that we send here? Because right now, if we try to send some query parameters, for example, in Postman, if we say, for example, ID, and we say like this, the server will just respond with the whole list. It doesn't recognize this, and yeah. So let's go back to IntelliJ, and here in our get block of the get fruits endpoint, we try to read whatever parameters that we want to work with. So say, for example, that we want to make this endpoint accept a parameter, for example, of an ID. So the client can send an ID parameter to get that specific fruit with that specific ID. So let's try to read the parameter. Let's make a variable ID, and this variable will be equal call dot query parameters, and then using the square brackets we pass this the specific query, what the specific query parameter is, which is ID in this case. Now notice something, that because this is a query parameter and the ID is a nullable string, of course, because it's not guaranteed that the client will send this parameter. It might be sent, it might not be. So that's why it's a nullable string, and it's useful for us because we can handle both cases, because we know if the client didn't send it. So what we can do is use the Elvis operator here and say call dot respond. So we can respond here with fruit list. So what this basically does is, hey, if the ID is null, so if the client didn't send an ID, we respond basically with the whole list. And make sure to add return here, because if we don't do this, the server will continue executing code beyond this point. But like this, we tell it that if the ID is null, you just execute this line and that's it. Okay, so if the client did send an ID, what we want to do here is not return the whole fruit list. What we want to do is, for example, make a filtered list. So let's filter our list, and we can do fruit list dot use the filter function from the Kotlin collections to filter our list. So it ID equals ID. So basically we are passing this predicate to the filter function, and the filter function will return only items that actually match this specific condition, which is always going to be one item in our case, and it's going to return a new list. So this filtered list is of type list of fruits. So here we are going to return a filtered list. So let's restart our server, go back to Postman, and right here we have a query parameter of ID and the value is 2. So let's send a request, and as you can see, our server responded with a list that only contains the item with ID 2. And if we remove this query parameter by clicking the checkbox here, the server will return the whole list. Okay, good. Let's make a specific endpoint where we actually receive data for a new fruit. So we receive data from the client for a new fruit that, hey, we want to add this fruit to your list, and we add it to the list. So to do that, we are going to make a new endpoint. The method is going to be a post request, and here we are going to specify what kind of body we expect the client to send. So we expect the client to send a fruit, and our endpoint, our endpoint is going to be /add fruit, basically. And here in this post block, we have access to the fruit that the client sent using it. As you can see, it is of type fruit, but I'm going to change the name here. Let's call it new fruit, like this. So instead of the default it name. And what we want to do here is access our list and add the new fruit. And of course, this is an immutable list. So let's change it to a mutable list, like this. And now we can add new items. So add new fruit. And after we add a fruit, we can respond to the client and say that we have added the fruit successfully. So we can do call.respond. The HTTP status code for adding, like creating a new entry of data in the database is usually the created status code, and we can respond with the newly created fruit itself. So let's restart our server and go back to Postman. So I'm going to open a new tab by clicking this one and clicking duplicate tab, just to duplicate it. And I'm going to change the endpoint to add fruit, just like this, and change the request to a post request from here. And the last thing that we want to do is define what data we want to send to the server, basically. So this is going to be the body. So go to the body tab here, click row, make sure JSON is selected, and we are going to represent the new fruit that we want to add in a JSON format. So we open these curly braces, and we have the ID, and then colon, and then the value of the ID. So just for example, say 5, and name, say watermelon, for example. And yeah, after that we can hit send, and as you can see, the server responded with created, and it returned the same fruit that we've sent because we told it so. And if you go back to the get fruits route, we make a request. As you can see, the watermelon that we've added is here with the list. One last thing is that what you will notice is if we try to make a request to add fruit here, but for example we messed up for example the name, so we send like an incorrected format body, the server is going to automatically respond with this bad request. But if you want to customize this further, like you want to respond with a specific error message, maybe let's go to the server. So what I showed you right now is a kind of a newer method. I'm not aware that this was in previous versions of Ktor, but this way of defining like the body doesn't allow you to have so much customization as far as I know. So we're going to remove this like this here, and instead inside our body here, what we're going to say is we're going to create a new value, call it new fruits, and then we're going to say call dot receive, and then define that we are going to receive a fruit here. Now what's going to happen is that if the client sends an incorrected format body, this code or this receive function is going to throw an exception. So what we can do is we can put this call inside of a try catch block. So I'm holding Control Shift and pressing the our up arrow to bring this inside the try block, so like that. So if everything was successful, the fruit will be added and the server will respond with created. But if an exception is thrown, what are we going to do? So if an exception is thrown, we can say respond, not response, but respond, yes. And let's say HTTP status code is bad request, and let's use our simple response that we created earlier. So is success is going to be false, and message is going to be wrong fruit format, please verify, for example. So let's restart the server and go back to Postman. And right now, let's try to create a new fruit with this wrong body. And as you can see, the server responded with our error message that we have defined here. And if you go back to the server, as you can see, you can actually see the log here of the request that we've made and what the response was. And you can actually print the stack trace of the error message if you want, but we didn't do that. And you will see everything here in the console. So that was it for this tutorial. I hope you find the first video useful. See you in the